A listener sent in a story about a terrifying tour taken some 20 years ago in Vancouver, Canada. He tells us he was among 3 overseas students who, on a summer holiday, took a ferry from the mainland across to Vancouver Island. The crossing would take several hours, and they would spend most of the time on the deck, taking in the views and hoping to spot whales. Now, at some point, they noticed an older man, maybe a native, and he was going from group to group, doing what seemed to be those caricature drawing. You know, a few dollars and you get a picture of yourself riding on a whale. Now, the boys were all from mainland China. We'll call our listener Zhao. Well, let's call him Joe. He says that neither him or the other classmate, let's call him Stephen, they didn't care much about the old artist, but their third classmate, we can call him Einstein because he himself chose that as his English name. Einstein, he recalled, was annoyed from the start, calling the approaching old artist an incoming beggar. The boys were sitting down in some plastic chairs on the upper deck when the old man shuffled quietly over to the boys, leaned against the railing, took out a sheet of paper, and in a moment of uncomfortable silence, gazed rather intensely at Joe for about 30 seconds, and then, without saying a word, began scrawling away with a charcoal pencil.
See? This again. He's going to draw you first, so you feel guilty that he did the work just for you, and then you have to pay him money for a picture of yourself,
decried Einstein. Calm down. Okay, so what? Maybe it's good. If it's a really good drawing of me, maybe I want to buy it. Yeah, so what about it? Just about then, the old artist had finished and, without saying a word, handed the drawing to Joe. Joe was a bit befuddled, though. The drawing was fairly well done. A skillful face, a realistic drawing, too, not one of those exaggerated cartoon ones. However, he didn't really think it looked like him. He held it up to Stephen and Einstein. Einstein, of course, cackled in glee.
Oh my God, is this guy blind? You're gonna pay for that? It doesn't even look like you.
Very quietly, the old man said, I'm sorry, but I cannot take any money for it. It's yours to take or not to take. Einstein muttered more disbelief.
Yeah, right. Well, what's the catch, huh?
Stephen, on the other hand, found himself more intrigued as he carefully looked into the sketch a little closer. Oh, it is you, Joe. I mean, I think he's sketched you as an old man, right? All the boys looked at the old artist like he would have an explanation. And so he did. He told them that he had a gift and was able to sketch people, but only on what would be the last day of their life. Now, Stephen was fascinated with all this, and he asked the artist, Okay, so wait then. So, I see you put a date on here. Is that right? 10/21/2060. Wait, you're saying that this is what Joe will look like on the day he dies, and you're saying that's the date he will die then? The old native man paused and, Yes, but, the date is not my own thoughts. This is something where maybe a spirit is guiding my hand. Einstein looked like he was going to explode.
Stephen, you idiot. You believe anything. And Joe, you're not really going to pay for this mumbo-jumbo stuff, are you?
Joe took the sketch back and looked deeper into it. It looked so familiar to him, and Joe took out his wallet and flipped over to a plastic-coated photo that he had in it. And he held it up to the sketch. You see, it was a photo that he kept in his wallet of his father and his grandfather that was taken at his high school graduation. Now, in that photo, Joe's granddad was about 80 years old. Stephen commented, Wait, wow, That is eerie. Yeah, I can see it. The sketch really matches what you're probably going to look like around 80 years old. Joe put up the side-by-side comparison, purposely annoying, into the face of Einstein, who pushed the paper and wallet photo away.
Okay, you morons, give the magic Indian his money for his prediction, and you'll never be able to disprove it anyway.
The old native artist would have had every right to be insulted by Einstein's scoffing outbursts, but instead he simply said, "I'm sorry, I cannot accept any money." Now Joe was lost in a bit of wonderment. He wasn't sure if this was a real supernatural drawing of himself in the future, but Stephen, who was a bit more the superstitious type, looked a little spooked by the whole thing. "Excuse me, sir. Can you try me? Could you draw me on, well, as you say, what I would look like on the last day of my life?" The old man nodded, leaned back against the railing, carefully pulled out a paper from his satchel, and began scrawling away. The wind was coming off the water now, and it was blowing his black hair around, but it's as if he went into a trance-like state, unaware of the ferry on the waves or anything else around him. Einstein was, of course, more animated than ever.
All he's doing is imagining your dumb face with wrinkles and then making up a fake date, and he says no money. But he knows you guys are going to feel guilty and give him cash on the way out anyway.
Joe then chastised Einstein. "Oh, you know what? Hey, I'm going to give him $20 just because it's worth it to see you having a nervous breakdown over this whole thing. Heck, it's worth $50 to see you losing it." At that moment, a strong gust of wind came off the water. It almost blew Joe's sketch out of his hands had he not gripped it quickly, and Einstein had to grab his baseball cap for blowing off. Guys, take a look at this," urged Stephen. The gust of wind was so strong it blew the sunglasses off the old native man, tossing them off the metal safety railings with a ping, and they bounced into the water. But the old man was still scribbling in a trance-like state. He didn't so much as flinch from his drawing, and that's when they realized he was blind. Without his sunglasses, they could see his eyeballs were yellowed, and it's as if they were dead in the sockets. As they took that in, the old man finished the charcoal portrait. He paused and closed his eyelids, and his arms moved gracefully around as he scrawled out a date. Stephen, now aware that the old man was blind, got out of his chair and took the picture from the man's hands. Stephen sighed as if he was just about to have his entire fate revealed, and Joe was curious too, but Einstein could only squawk.
Okay, go ahead, look at it. Look at your imaginary date. You're gonna die, stupid.
The sketch of Ben was, again, remarkably detailed and realistic, just as the previous one of Joe, and while it did look like Stephen, instead of his current full head of hair, this depicted a bald Stephen with a sort of island of flyaway hair on the top, crow's feet wrinkles around his eyes. This depiction even had him with prominent, very even and white teeth. Einstein couldn't take it and snatched it right out of Ben's hands, almost tearing the paper in his contemptuous enthusiasm.
I'm gonna frame it and put it on your dorm room wall and title it Retard Stephen. The teeth aren't even close.
Stephen was too freaked out to even care about Einstein's jeering and reads the date out loud. 7/23/2046. That means I'm not going to make it past 65. And neither did my father. Stephen took out his wallet and flipped it to a family photo taken at a spring festival when he was just a boy. "See, Joe, that's my grandfather, and those are my two uncles. and all three of them had, to varying degrees, the same similar balding pattern. See, they got those peculiar lone islands of hair on the top. Joe noted something else. The teeth. Yeah, my family, everyone had bad teeth, so they all needed dentures by the time they were older. And I'll probably need dentures too, so actually the sketch is quite accurate. Even Einstein was momentarily intrigued with the coincidence. The thing is, none of them are alive now. And you want to know something? My grandfather passed away when he was only 62 from a bad heart. My uncles didn't make it past 65 either. So that tells me that this drawing and this prediction is correct. I'm sure of it. We don't live long. I believe this man now. At this point in the crossing, the ferry was closing in on the shores of Vancouver Island, and choppy seas and strong winds were coming up. It was not raining yet, but clouds indicated stormy weather was on the way soon. Most of the tourists who were outside at the start had made their way back into the covered enclosed section of the ferry. But see, now the boys were so enthralled or upset, or in Stephen's case, in a sort of stupefied state, that they did not even notice they were the last ones out there. And they barely even noticed the worsening weather. Now, all along, the old native man, he seemed unaffected by anything, still would just lean back against the railing with his eyes closed, holding that satchel of paper. Einstein had only been temporarily stifled. He now seemed to have developed an even nastier attitude, as if he was overcompensating for being taken in a little. He stands up and holds 5 fingers to the old native artist.
Hey, so-called blind man! How many fingers am I holding up,
I don't know, replies the old man.
Okay, try this one. How many?
And Einstein waves the FU finger at the old man. I don't know. I'm blind, son. Einstein became irrational.
I tell you what, I don't have any family photos in my wallet, so whatever trick you're doing, it won't work on me. You draw me on my last day of life and do me, and if you can convince me, I will give you the $100 bill in my pocket, which is what this is probably all about anyway, isn't it?
With that, the old man just quietly pulled out another piece of paper. His eyes closed. He paused. Then he opened his eyelids, and those yellow, darkened eyes looked deep into Einstein's smirking face for a while, and again went into a trance-like state, scrawling away. Einstein crossed his arms in a cocky way and made mock model poses.
Hey, I bet you can see the $100 bill in my pocket. I bet you that you could see.
Joe and Stephen remained seated, but gave Einstein the most disapproving looks they could. Now the winds were starting to howl across the deck, and their clothes were flapping in the wind. The ferry was lurching a bit in the more hostile waters, and even Einstein struggled to stand still as the old man was finishing up.
Time's up, Chief Know-It-All. Okay, give it to me. Let me take a look.
There it was, a very well done portrait again, but just that. Just a simple artist depiction, just as he looked today, and he had simply signed it with today's date. There was no wrinkles or balding hair or mysterious future date that he needed to calculate. For Einstein, this was proof of a fraud.
You see, you two idiots, when I challenged him with science, he gave up. Okay, now do you believe me or not?
The old native artist really did look a little bit sad now. Okay, well, I guess I'll just go now. And with his eyes closed, he guided himself along the railing, presumably to go back to the interior section of the ferry.
Oh, you're a bloody phony. Look, he's still pretending to be blind, even after I just proved he's a liar.
Joe and Stephen got up and almost fell backwards into their seats from the strong winds. They wanted to catch the incensed Einstein chasing after the old man.
Dude, just let him go.
Einstein was running into the wind, trying to catch up to the old artist, who himself was struggling as the storm broke and thunder cracked. Now, by the time Einstein caught up with the old man, rain was soaking the deck and making it very difficult to walk as the ferry started to rock and roll in the water. The storm clouds were making it as dark as sundown. They were squinting from the strong rains being blown in their face and eyes, but they could hear Einstein, who'd now grabbed the old native man by the collar and was shouting him down. Steve and Joe were shouting at him to stop, but maybe they couldn't be heard. Besides, Einstein had lost his mind. Through it all, they could see the two struggling and shoving. Einstein had both hands on the artist's satchel and was attempting to pull it off of him, while the old man held himself to the slippery guardrail with all his strength. The ferry must have walloped a rogue wave because it went high and up, and with that, Einstein refusing to let go of the artist's bag, and the artist himself refusing to let go of the railing. Einstein was flung, something like a pendulum, like a human trebuchet, flung in a semicircle across the slippery deck into the guardrails, where he buckled and flipped over, only barely letting go of the satchel in time to grab a wet railing and hang off the side of the ferry with his feet dangling just inches above the churning water. Joe and Stephen came sliding in just in time to stop themselves and see their classmate Einstein holding on for dear life. Behind them stood the old man, and the last thing Einstein would see would be the old native man and a crack of lightning behind him. It would illuminate them all for a split second, and perhaps the shock of that lightning would cause Einstein to lose his grip on the wet metal railing and drop into the dark waters below. Joe and Stephen could only stand there in the wind in shock. Now, the boys would make their way inside to announce a man overboard, and the ferry staff would do everything right. Search boats would rush out to the waters to find the Chinese exchange student, but to no avail. Now, strangely, nobody found the old artist to take his statement. But when Joe and Stephen were asked to describe what their friend looked like, Stephen realized he had stuffed the sketch of Einstein in his pocket and thought to pull it out and show the rescue team just what exactly he did look like. However, as Stephen unfolded the damp, rain-soaked paper, it revealed just something of a charcoal smudge. I mean, a face, yeah, but so smudged and darkened that it resembled more of a ghost face than a man.